They had already decided his fate. The heavy doors slammed shut behind him, echoing through the stone chamber. Every footstep that followed was a reminder. There was no escape. The prisoner's hands were bound, his body tense, yet his eyes held something the guards didn't expect. Fear? Maybe, but also something else. A strange calmness, almost as if he knew that the world outside these walls would never see him the same way again. The crowd gathered in silence, whispering among themselves. Some were curious, some indifferent, but all were watching, waiting for the inevitable. The executioner sharpened his blade with mechanical precision, the metallic sound cutting through the thick, tense air like a knife itself. Every second felt longer than the last, each heartbeat echoing louder than the chains clanking against the cold stone floor. Outside the chamber, the wind howled, rattling the old wooden doors, carrying with it a sense of dread that made even the bravest onlooker shiver. It was as if the world itself knew something extraordinary was about to happen, something that would change the rules of life and death, even if no one yet understood it. The prisoner's eyes scanned the room. Every shadow seemed to move, every flicker of light telling a story no one else could see. He wasn't just a man awaiting his end. He was a symbol of the impossible, a spark waiting for a single moment to ignite. And though no one knew it yet, that moment was closer than anyone could imagine. The guards exchanged nervous glances. They had executed many before, and each time, they thought they were ready. But something about him made their confident steps falter. His gaze, unflinching and unwavering, challenged them silently, almost daring fate itself to change course. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The executioner raised his weapon, the crowd holding its collective breath, every eye fixed on the prisoner, expecting the inevitable. But deep inside, something else stirred, a presence, invisible yet undeniable, hovering above, ready to rewrite the story that everyone thought was already written. And in that suspended moment, the impossible began to whisper. The prisoner's gaze did not waver. Though his body was restrained, though the iron chains bit into his wrists, his spirit seemed untouchable. Every breath he took was deliberate, slow, as if he were measuring the moments left in the world before his life was ripped away. But there was a fire in him, subtle yet undeniable, that no blade, no guard, no fear could extinguish. The spectators didn't notice it at first. They were focused on the spectacle, the expected horror, but some began to feel it in their bones, a strange tension they could not name. He looked upward, not in desperation, not in pleading. His eyes traced the shadows dancing above the high stone walls, the faint light flickering through the cracks in the ceiling. There was anticipation there, yes, but more than that, there was hope. A hope that seemed impossible, absurd, yet somehow undeniable. The crowd felt it too, though they didn't understand why. It was the kind of hope that makes a heart beat faster, that pulls you forward even when reason screams for caution. The guards shifted uneasily. Their confidence, built over years of enforcing fate, now wavered in ways they could not explain. They had faced countless prisoners, countless desperate souls, but there was something different about him, something in his stance, in the quiet intensity of his gaze that whispered, "This one is not like the others." They tightened their grips on their weapons, but their hands trembled slightly, betraying the slightest crack in their certainty. And then the prisoner's lips moved, not in words, not in a shout, but in a barely audible murmur, so soft it seemed like a breeze over the stones. It was a sound no one else could hear clearly, yet somehow it resonated with the entire room. For a fraction of a second, the air itself seemed to pause. Even the wind outside, howling against the doors, quieted as if listening. Every heartbeat became deafening. Every breath, a drum marking the passage of something extraordinary. The tension was no longer just around the prisoner. It had spread, infecting the guards, the crowd, the room itself. Everyone felt it. The world was about to change. And then a subtle movement above caught the prisoner's eye. A shadow, almost imperceptible, shifted in a way no normal presence should. The prisoner's chest rose slightly, his shoulders straightened, and for the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips. Not a triumphant smile, not a smug one, but the quiet, knowing smile of someone who has already seen the outcome in their mind and knows that fate is about to bend. The crowd noticed it next. A ripple of confusion spread among them, a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. They could not understand why the prisoner seemed calm, why he was smiling at the very moment death approached. Questions filled their minds. How can he be unafraid? Does he know something we don't? And in that instant, as fear and curiosity tangled together like a storm, the prisoner became more than just a man about to die. He became a symbol of the impossible, the anchor of suspense, the eye of a storm that had yet to break. Everyone in that chamber felt it, though none could explain it. Something was coming, something unstoppable, something legendary. For a brief moment, time itself seemed to hang in the balance. Every second stretched, every glance felt heavier. The prisoner's calm defied logic, the guard's certainty wavered, and the crowd's murmurs grew into a symphony of tension and anticipation. And somewhere above, unseen, the first stirrings of destiny began to descend. The room was still, almost painfully so. Every eye was fixed on the prisoner. Yet somehow, the attention began to shift upward. Shadows flickered across the high walls, distorted by the torches lining the chamber. Something moved in ways that defied reason. A ripple of unease ran through the crowd, subtle at first, like a whisper of wind, but it quickly spread, crawling into the bones of every spectator. The guards, once brimming with confidence, tightened their grips on their weapons. Each step they took now carried the weight of uncertainty. Their breaths came faster, shallow, betraying the unease they tried so hard to suppress. Years of training, countless executions. They had faced fear and death many times, yet something about this moment felt different. It wasn't just the prisoner. No, it was something else, something unseen. The prisoner's gaze remained fixed, calm, yet intense. His body, though bound, radiated a strange energy. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. He wasn't merely waiting for death. He was waiting for a moment. A single moment that could change everything. And everyone, whether they knew it or not, was about to be drawn into it. Above, the shadows shifted again. A faint glimmer of movement, faster than any human eye could follow, danced across the ceiling. A whisper of air, a sudden drop in temperature, made the torches flicker wildly. The crowd instinctively stepped back, murmuring anxiously. The guards exchanged confused glances, their previous bravado evaporating in the thick, tense atmosphere. Something was coming, and none of them could see it clearly yet. The prisoner's eyes followed the motion above, unwavering, unflinching. A smile, slight, almost imperceptible, played across his lips. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it fear. It was the quiet knowledge that the rules of this world were about to bend, that the impossible, the unthinkable, was on the brink of becoming reality. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the crowd noticed it, a shadow detaching from the ceiling, moving with an unnatural precision. A shiver ran down spines as realization began to dawn. The prisoner wasn't alone in this moment. Something or someone was descending, something that defied logic, that shattered expectation. The guards stiffened, gripping their weapons tighter, their knuckles white. Some swallowed hard, trying to steady themselves, trying to convince their minds that it was just a trick of the light. The shadow drew nearer, and with it, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. Conversations died mid-word. Breaths caught in throats. Eyes widened, pupils dilating as fear and anticipation mingled in a potent, electric mix. Every person present felt it. The undeniable shift in the balance of power, the silent announcement that nothing would ever be the same. The prisoner shifted slightly, leaning forward despite the chains. His calmness, his confidence, became a focal point, drawing attention away from the approaching presence above. It was as if he and this invisible force were connected, two halves of a storm that was about to break. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the moment stretched taut. Seconds became eternities. Every heartbeat echoed like a drumbeat marking the countdown to something monumental. And then, a faint gust of wind swept through the chamber. The torches flickered violently, shadows dancing like wraiths on the stone walls. The prisoners' eyes glimmered with anticipation. The crowd collectively leaned forward, drawn by a force they could neither see nor resist. Even the guards, poised for action, felt the pull of something greater than themselves. The silence was deafening. Every sound, the whisper of air, the clank of chains, the distant murmur of the crowd, was amplified in the tension-soaked chamber. Time itself seemed suspended. And then, without warning, a movement, sharp and precise, tore through the air above. Something had arrived. Something unstoppable. Something legendary. And in that single, suspended moment, the chamber no longer felt like a place of execution. It felt like the edge of destiny itself, waiting to unfold. Then it happened. The air above the chamber shifted, almost imperceptibly at first, like a sudden hush sweeping through a crowded room. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling, moving with impossible speed, fluid and deliberate, cutting through the tension like a blade. Every eye instinctively followed it, though none could comprehend what they were seeing. And then, Bruce Lee appeared, not with fanfare, not with noise, but with the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who has mastered the impossible. He dropped from the sky, every movement precise, every motion controlled, yet infused with a raw, electrifying power. His arrival was not just physical. It was spiritual, a force that radiated through the chamber, through the crowd, through every guard who dared meet his gaze. The prisoner's eyes widened, not in shock, but in recognition. There was no fear there, only a deep, unspoken understanding. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the catalyst that could bend destiny itself. The chains on his wrists suddenly felt lighter, the stone floor beneath him seeming to pulse with anticipation. The guards reacted instinctively, raising their weapons, shouting orders, but it was already too late. Bruce Lee's presence alone was enough to command attention, to shift the balance of power. Every step he took was a demonstration of mastery, every movement a silent declaration. The rules of this moment had changed. The crowd gasped. Murmurs turned to whispers, whispers to stunned silence. No one could tear their eyes away from the man descending like a living legend. Some felt fear, some awe, and some felt a strange mixture of both. They didn't understand what was happening, but every fiber of their being told them that the impossible had arrived. Bruce Lee landed softly, his feet barely making a sound against the stone floor, yet the impact was undeniable. The energy in the room shifted, vibrating through the air like an electric current. The guards froze, caught between training and instinct, between fear and disbelief. Their confidence had crumbled in seconds. They had faced skilled fighters before, but never someone like this. The prisoner, still chained, felt a surge of hope unlike anything he had known. In that instant, he realized survival was possible, not through chance, but through the intervention of someone who was not bound by ordinary limits. Bruce Lee's eyes scanned the room, calm yet intense, taking in every movement, every shadow, every intention. His gaze alone was enough to unnerve the most hardened of men. Time seemed to stretch. Every second was amplified. The murmurs of the crowd faded into the background, replaced by the pulse of anticipation, the rhythm of destiny in motion. Bruce Lee's presence was magnetic, drawing attention not just to his body, but to the inevitability of what was about to unfold. And then a subtle shift, a step forward, deliberate yet fluid, signaling that action was coming. Not chaotic, not reckless, but precise, controlled, and devastatingly effective. Every movement was poetry in motion, every gesture a lesson in skill, confidence, and mastery. The chamber, once a place of doom, now felt alive. Every eye was locked on him. Every heartbeat echoed in tandem with the silent rhythm he brought. The guards' grip on their weapons faltered. The crowd leaned in, almost collectively holding its breath. The prisoner's chest rose in quiet anticipation, his hope ignited by the legend that had just entered the room. Bruce Lee's arrival was not just a turning point. It was a declaration. The impossible had arrived. The hunter would become the hunted. And in that brief, suspended moment, before any action had been taken, the entire world within that chamber had changed. And then, without warning, Bruce Lee moved. The room was no longer the same. The air crackled with electricity, the kind that made every nerve in the body tingle, every heartbeat pound in frantic anticipation. What had begun as a routine execution had transformed into something else entirely. A stage where the rules of fear, power, and destiny were being rewritten in real time. Bruce Lee stood in the center of the chamber, calm, poised, yet emanating a force that made the very walls feel alive. The guards, once confident in their training, now trembled. Every instinct screamed at them that they were outmatched, but years of authority and pride kept them rooted in place. They raised their weapons, but their hands shook uncontrollably. Even the most seasoned among them felt the shift, a silent, undeniable declaration that the balance of power had already tipped. Bruce Lee's eyes scanned the room, sharp as a blade, reading every intention, every twitch of muscle, every whisper of fear. He did not move recklessly, but with the precise timing of someone who knew the outcome before it unfolded. His presence alone was enough to dominate the space, to control the chaos without a single strike. And yet, the energy he radiated hinted at the storm that was about to break. The prisoner, still bound in chains, felt hope surge through his veins. Where moments ago he had awaited death with resignation, now he sensed possibility. Survival was no longer chance. It was a certainty contingent on the mastery that had just descended from the sky. He watched as Bruce Lee moved, a fluid motion that was both silent and deafening, both graceful and terrifying. Each step he took seemed to bend the air, each gesture commanding attention, control, and awe. The crowd was entranced. Murmurs had turned to wide-eyed silence. Every person present felt this subtle shift, fear giving way to astonishment, doubt giving way to fascination. No one had ever seen power like this, controlled, deliberate, unstoppable. It was as though the rules of human capability had been suspended, and everyone watching was caught in the wake of a living legend. Then it began. The first guard made a move, quick, confident, assuming that sheer numbers could overwhelm. Bruce Lee didn't flinch. His movements were minimal, almost casual, yet precise beyond imagination. In an instant, the momentum shifted. The guard's advantage dissolved as if it had never existed. A swift, controlled motion, a redirection of energy, and the balance of power collapsed. One by one, the guards faltered, unprepared for the mastery confronting them. It wasn't violence for the sake of violence. It was control, skill, and inevitability manifest. Bruce Lee did not rely on brute force. He relied on the principles he had honed for decades: speed, precision, anticipation, and the ability to read human intent like an open book. Every move he made demonstrated dominance, not just physically, but psychologically. The prisoners' would-be executioners now understood. They were no longer the hunters. They were caught in a web they could not escape. The prisoner's heart raced, but it was no longer in terror. It was exhilaration. The chains that had once symbolized despair now felt irrelevant. Bruce Lee's presence, his mastery, had transformed the chamber into a place where the impossible was tangible, where hope had returned in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Even the spectators felt it. Some gasped, some whispered, others froze, unable to process what they were witnessing. The atmosphere was thick with awe and disbelief. Every second amplified the sensation that the rules had changed, that what had begun as an execution was now a stage for legend. And then, just as the momentum reached its peak, Bruce Lee paused, briefly, intentionally. Every eye in the room locked on him. Every person, from prisoner to guard to spectator, understood the unspoken truth. The hunter had become the hunted. The impossible had arrived. And in the next moment, the legend would make its move. The chamber was silent now, but it was not the calm that comes from peace. It was the silence that follows a storm, a silence charged with awe, fear, and the unspoken recognition of power. The guards, who had moments ago been filled with confidence and authority, now crouched, frozen, unsure of how to react. Their weapons lowered slightly, not out of choice, but because their minds had already surrendered to the force in front of them. Bruce Lee stood at the center, still and composed, yet the air around him pulsed with energy. His breathing was controlled, his eyes scanning every corner of the chamber, every shadow, every possibility. Every movement he had made had been deliberate, precise, and devastatingly effective. And now, having demonstrated mastery, he did not need to act further. The room itself seemed to respect him. The prisoner, freed from the grip of fear, if not yet from his chains, could barely comprehend what had just happened. One moment, death had been imminent. The next, survival seemed certain. Yet it wasn't just survival. It was a revelation. The arrival of Bruce Lee had altered not only the course of events, but the very perception of possibility. The prisoner's heart raced with gratitude, relief, and disbelief all at once. It was as if hope itself had taken human form. The guards whispered to each other, trying to rationalize the impossible. "It's impossible," one muttered. He shouldn't be able to move like that," said another. But the words fell flat, hollow, because the truth was undeniable. Their training, their experience, their instincts, none of it had prepared them for this. They had faced many opponents, many challenges, but none that could bend the laws of expectation as Bruce Lee had. Even the crowd, who had come merely to witness an execution, felt the shift in their perception. Eyes widened, breaths caught. Their hearts pounded not with fear for themselves, but with reverence, astonishment, and a strange sense of awe. They did not understand the techniques, the subtle flows of energy, the precision behind every movement. But they felt the results. And what they felt was respect, unearned, unspoken, yet universal. The prisoner studied Bruce Lee, and for the first time, he realized the depth of the man's presence. It was not only skill that commanded attention. It was the confidence, the discipline, the understanding of the world at a level few could comprehend. Every step, every motion, every glance carried weight beyond the physical. It was as if Bruce Lee could see through intentions, through plans, through the very fabric of fear itself. Even as the room slowly recovered from a shock, the question lingered in the air. Who could challenge such mastery? The answer seemed obvious. No one. Not here, not now, not ever. The execution, which had once been a simple act of authority and inevitability, had become a theater of legend. The prisoner, once powerless, now understood that survival was a byproduct of witnessing greatness. And the guards, once confident, now understood that respect could emerge from fear more quickly than they had ever imagined. Yet the moment did not feel complete. There was a subtle tension remaining, an unspoken understanding that what had just occurred was a glimpse, not a conclusion. The air still held anticipation, the energy of potential action, and the knowledge that Bruce Lee's intervention had set a course of events that none could fully predict. The mystery of his timing, his movements, his mastery lingered, creating a sense of respect that was both mental and emotional. The room had changed. The rules had changed. The balance had shifted, and everyone present understood it, even if they could not articulate it. Bruce Lee had arrived, executed precision, and now commanded not only the space but the perception of power itself. His legend was no longer a story whispered in distant places. It was unfolding before their very eyes, real and undeniable. And as the crowd and the guards alike held their breaths, one thought crystallized in every mind. There was more to come. The impossible had not just arrived. It had lingered, poised to act, and ready to transform the final moments into something beyond imagination. The chamber was alive with a tension so thick it felt almost tangible. Every eye was locked on Bruce Lee, whose presence alone had transformed a room of execution into a stage of legend. The guards, still reeling from their defeat, exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to flee, resist, or surrender entirely. Even the spectators, who had come merely to witness an ending, now realized they were watching something extraordinary, something that would linger in their memories long after the echoes of this day faded. Bruce Lee's movements were measured, deliberate, yet filled with an invisible energy that seemed to bend the air around him. He did not speak, and yet every person in the room felt the weight of his intent. His eyes scanned the space, calculating, anticipating, commanding. One could almost hear the silent rhythm of his mind, the pulse of thought and mastery moving faster than the eye could follow. The prisoner, still bound by chains, could barely comprehend the surreal reality unfolding before him. Moments ago, death had been imminent. Now, the impossible had become tangible. Bruce Lee was not just a savior. He was a force beyond understanding, a presence that challenged the very notion of limitation. Every breath the prisoner took carried the electricity of awe, relief, and disbelief. The guards attempted to regroup, raising their weapons, but hesitation gripped them. Confidence had evaporated, replaced by fear and respect, a strange mixture that left them paralyzed. Each second that passed amplified the psychological weight of Bruce Lee's mastery. Every instinct, every calculation they had relied on for years, now seemed irrelevant. They were no longer the hunters. They were part of a lesson, a demonstration, and the gravity of that realization was inescapable. The chamber seemed to shrink around him. The torches flickered violently, as if in response to the energy Bruce Lee exuded. Shadows twisted and danced across the walls, creating illusions of movement, of unpredictability, further heightening the sense that reality itself had shifted. The prisoner's chains rattled lightly, but even they felt different now, as if the air itself acknowledged the impossibility of his fate being sealed. And then, a subtle shift. Bruce Lee moved, not quickly, not with haste, but with a precision so exact it made every other movement in the room seem sluggish, clumsy, and irrelevant. The guards instinctively readied themselves, though none knew what to expect. Their minds screamed that action was coming, but what kind of action they could not predict. Every muscle in their bodies tensed, every heartbeat accelerated, every thought narrowed down to a single, consuming point: survival or defeat. The prisoner held his breath. The crowd leaned forward, collectively suspended in anticipation. Even time seemed to pause, stretching each second into a sensation of infinity. The world beyond the chamber ceased to exist. There was only the room, only Bruce Lee, only the impossible becoming inevitable. Then, with a single, fluid motion, Bruce Lee's figure blurred, faster than human comprehension. The room erupted into motion and reaction, yet nothing happened exactly as anyone expected. Guards toppled, not from brute force alone, but from the overwhelming presence of mastery itself. Every movement he made carried authority, control, and inevitability. The prisoner, still bound, felt the chains almost loosen in the presence of that sheer dominance. And just as the crowd thought they might understand the extent of his power, Bruce Lee paused. A silence fell, heavier than ever before. Every eye was fixed, every heart pounding, every mind racing. The tension was unbearable, the anticipation absolute. Then came the unspoken message, clearer than any word. This was not the end. Not yet. Something far greater, far more extraordinary was about to happen. The impossible had arrived, but its final act was still waiting to unfold. The room, frozen in suspense, knew it. And so did the audience. What happened next would change everything.